I never asked for respect. I stopped expecting it somewhere around year 2 on Vyrath Prime, when Senator Vyrath Cell told her personal aide that she hoped the new human driver was at least capable of operating a vehicle without requiring supervision. She said it while I was standing 4 feet away, holding the door open for her, my hand on the frame. I closed the door behind her. I walked to the front of the shuttle. I drove. That was 6 years ago. My name is Devon Cole. I am 43 years old. I wake up at 0500 every morning in a small room on sub-level 9 of the residential block assigned to Concord service workers. I make coffee on a machine I brought from Earth, which is the only luxury I allow myself. The coffee on Vyrath Prime tastes like someone described coffee to a chemist who had never actually tasted it. The result is technically accurate and completely wrong. I do a maintenance check on the shuttle before every shift. Not because the system requires it, which it does, but because I was trained a long time ago to verify everything myself and trust nothing I haven't personally confirmed. I check the fuel cells, the navigation linkage, the door seals, and the secondary thruster response. It takes 11 minutes. I have done it for 6 years without skipping a single step. Then I pick up Senator Vyrath Cell. She is, by any objective measure, impressive. The Selthari are tall, iridescent beings with wide silver eyes and voices that carry natural harmonic undertones, so that even casual conversation sounds vaguely like music. Vyrath Cell is considered one of the 10 most politically effective senators in the Concord. She has authored 16 pieces of major legislation. She has negotiated 3 territorial disputes that came close to open conflict. She is, by all accounts, brilliant. She is also absolutely certain that humanity is a minor footnote in a story written by more important species. She never said it that directly. She was too elegant for that. Instead, she would say things in the shuttle, to her aide or her colleagues, while I drove, as though I were a part of the vehicle and not a person inside it. She once said that the Concord's decision to admit humanity was generous, perhaps beyond reason. She once wondered aloud, to a fellow senator sitting in the rear compartment, whether humans would eventually develop the cultural sophistication needed for meaningful political participation, or whether they would remain, in her word, decorative. She once asked me, directly, looking at me in the mirror with what seemed like genuine curiosity rather than malice, whether I ever felt limited by my biology. I told her the work suited me. She nodded slowly, the way someone nods when a child gives an answer that is sweet, but reveals how little they understand. Then she went back to her documents. I went back to driving. There is something people misunderstand about silence. They assume it means absence. That if someone isn't arguing, they have nothing to say. That if someone isn't defending themselves, they agree with the accusation. I have found, in my experience, that silence is frequently the most expensive thing a person can offer. It costs more than anger. Anger is easy. Anger is just pain wearing a loud coat. Silence, real silence, the kind where you hear everything and choose to say nothing, that takes a different kind of muscle. I had spent a long time building that muscle. I noticed things in the shuttle that the senator probably assumed I didn't notice. I noticed that she always positioned her documents so that the most sensitive materials faced the interior wall rather than the window. Operational habit, good one. I noticed that she always confirmed her own schedule verbally, even when her aide had already confirmed it, because she trusted herself more than she trusted systems. Smart. I noticed that she was harder on herself after bad sessions in the chamber, that she grew quieter, that she reviewed her own statements with a focus she never applied to her victories. She was rigorous, she was effective. She genuinely believed the Concord was worth improving. She just didn't think I was worth looking at. On the morning everything changed, I was already paying attention to things that weren't yet problems. That is the nature of my particular skill. I do not wait for things to become emergencies. I notice when the pattern is about to break before the break actually happens. Some people have called this paranoia. I have always thought of it as good maintenance, the same way I check the shuttle every morning. You do not wait for the thruster to fail. You notice the reading that is slightly off, and you address it before you are dealing with consequences instead of causes. The day had 2 things wrong with it before noon. First, Senator Vyrath Cell's testimony schedule against the Korath Syndicate, a major arms cartel with connections to at least 3 Concord member governments, had been made public 2 days earlier, when it should have been sealed until the morning of the hearing. Someone had moved information that wasn't supposed to move. I had read about it in the service worker newsfeed that nobody in the upper levels bothered to read because they assumed the people who read it didn't matter. Second, her aide suggested a route to the Senate chamber that moved through the secondary corridor network on level 4. It was technically faster by about 6 minutes. It was also almost entirely unmonitored, which I knew because I had spent 6 years learning the camera placements on every route I drove. I did not say anything about either of these things. I filed them in the place where I file things that are not yet problems, and I watched. We turned into the secondary corridor. The corridor sealed behind us. 3 beings stepped out from a maintenance alcove ahead. They were not security. Their equipment was not standard. Their positioning was not accidental. They spread apart from each other at precise angles, which told me they were trained, and they moved with the kind of settled confidence that meant they had done something similar before. The aide was out of the shuttle and gone before the door had fully opened. I noted that without surprise. Senator Vyrath's cell did not move. I could see her in the mirror, silver eyes wide, completely still, doing the intelligent thing, which was nothing, because there was nothing yet to do. I got out of the shuttle. I want to be clear about what happened next, because I have thought about how to describe it many times, and I always struggle with the same problem. It did not feel dramatic. It did not feel like anything at all, really. It felt like a maintenance check, like identifying what was wrong and addressing it in the correct sequence before the damage became permanent. The first one moved toward me with a weapon raised. I was already inside his reach before he could orient it properly. The second tried to come around my left. He didn't make it to my left. The third was more careful, but caution only helps when you have time for it, and by the time he was adjusting for what had happened to the first 2, he had already run out of time. I checked that they were not permanently harmed, because I was not trying to kill anyone, only to stop them. They were not permanently harmed. I straightened my jacket. I walked back to the shuttle and opened Senator Vyrath's cell's door. "We should move," I said. "They may have sent more than 3. She looked at me. She did not speak. She got out and walked with me to the secure emergency alcove at the corridor junction, which I had already identified on the route earlier that morning during maintenance, because that is the kind of thing I notice. We waited there for 20 minutes, while actual security swept the corridor and arrested the 3 individuals, and began the process of identifying who had hired them and why, which I suspected would lead back to the Korath Syndicate, but was not my business to pursue. For most of those 20 minutes, the senator was quiet. Then she asked it simply, which I respected. She did not perform shock or outrage. She just said, "Who are you?" I told her, not everything, but enough. 40 years ago, when the Concord's military forces reached humanity's outer colonies, we had no fleet that could match what was coming. We had no allies. We had no political standing in an interstellar community that had not yet decided to include us. What we had was a very clear understanding that the alternative to surviving was not surviving, and humans have always been unreasonably committed to surviving. Certain people were selected for a program that the people running it called the Berserker Initiative, which was a dramatic name for something that was, at its core, a question. How do you produce human soldiers who can function effectively in situations where every measurable advantage belongs to the other side? The answer, it turned out, was not about making humans stronger or faster. Other species had that. The answer was about precision, pattern recognition, the ability to process threat geometry so quickly that the body was already moving before the conscious mind had finished analyzing the situation, and the ability to continue functioning under conditions of extreme stress without the mental noise that normally accompanies fear. They trained 41 of us. The war ended. The Concord, to its credit, chose the Accords over continued conflict. Humanity was admitted. The program was closed, quietly and without ceremony, and the 41 of us were given civilian reassignments and politely encouraged to become unremarkable. Most of us did. Some did not survive the transition. The adjustment from being built for war to existing in peace is not always something a person can navigate successfully, and I do not judge anyone who found it too much. I found driving. I found that the skill of noticing things that were slightly wrong transferred fairly well to maintaining vehicles and managing routes. and keeping a very close eye on the spaces through which important people traveled. I found that it suited me. When I finished, Vyrath's cell was quiet again for a long time. Then she did something I had not expected. She began to speak, slowly and precisely, and what she was doing was accounting for herself. She repeated, not all of them, but several, the things she had said in the shuttle over the years. The comment about the Accords and extermination paperwork. The question about whether humans would develop sophistication. The wondering aloud about my limitations. She said each one the way a person says a thing they have recently understood to be wrong. I watched her do this, and I felt something that was not quite pity, and not quite respect, but lived somewhere between them. "Do you hate me?" she asked. I considered it genuinely, because she deserved a genuine answer, rather than a polite one. "No," I said. "Hate requires a kind of sustained attention I don't usually have energy for. You were dismissive. You were wrong, but you were not cruel, and you were not stupid. You were just someone who had never been given a reason to look closely. You could have told me," she said, "at any point. You could have corrected me." "I could have," I agreed. "Why didn't you?" I thought about how to answer that honestly. "Because I wasn't trying to convince you of anything," I said. "I wasn't there to perform humanity for your approval. I was there to drive the shuttle and make sure you arrived safely, which is what I did, every day for 6 years." She looked at me with an expression I had not seen on her face before. It was not embarrassment exactly, though there was some of that. It was more like the look of a very intelligent person who has discovered a significant error in a calculation they were certain about. "I asked you once," she said quietly, "whether you felt diminished. You did. What was the answer? The real one?" I looked at the wall of the secure alcove for a moment. Somewhere above us, security teams were finishing their sweep. "I feel exactly what I was trained to feel in a situation like that," I said, "which is a clear head and a focus on what needs doing. What you thought of me was not a part of what needed doing. It still isn't." She testified that afternoon. The Korath Syndicate exposure went exactly as the evidence required it to go. It was, by political standards, a significant moment. Her colleagues called it one of the most important hearings of the current session. I waited with the shuttle in the service bay. I heard, later, through the service worker feed, that she had added something unscripted to the end of her closing remarks. I did not hear it live. I read the transcript the next morning over my coffee. She spoke about her driver. She did not use my name. She described what she had witnessed in the corridor, not with exaggeration or drama, but plainly, the way someone describes a thing they want people to actually understand, rather than simply react to. She described a man who had spent 6 years ensuring her safety in complete anonymity, who had placed himself between her and a lethal threat without hesitation and without any apparent expectation of recognition, who had then, when it was over, asked if she was hurt. She said she had spent her career believing that greatness announced itself, that significance came with visibility, that the beings who mattered were the ones who made themselves known. She said she had been wrong. I read that part twice. Then I finished my coffee and went to do the morning maintenance check. The next morning, she was already in the shuttle when I arrived, working through documents the way she always does. I took my seat. I ran through the final checks. I adjusted the mirror. She did not look up from her work. But as I reached for the ignition, she said, quietly and without ceremony, "Good morning, Davin." My name, not a title, not a category. My name. I started the shuttle. "Good morning, Senator," I said. "Buckle in. Traffic is bad on the upper ring today." She buckled in. I drove.